Kelly Bear here. I'm with you today for a slightly different video to my usual fare. I will be talking about tarot and witchcraft as part of this video because it all ties in with it. But it's going to be more of a sort of a ramble. That's not unusual for me, but a ramble on a sort of more sort of philosophical type video. The kind of videos that I really enjoy also watching, but often don't have the confidence to make myself. But I'm giving it a go. So let's have at it. So you'll see from the title of this video, I'll be talking about animism and paradigm shifts. My paradigm shifts. I can only speak to my experience. But the thing that started this all off was some journaling work I was doing with the tarot. And this is something that has been sort of going on and shifting and, happening for a while. And it is something that I also touched on Polish folk witches, trad witch tag. I really started, it really sort of came to the fore yesterday after lots of things have been bubbling along, and it was this particular journaling exercise from A Year in the Wildwood by Alison Cross. That's what I'm doing this year. I'm doing A Year in the Wildwood, which starts off with the Daft Days, which are for the 12 days of Christmas, or the days from the 26th, I think it's from the 26th of December to like the 5th or 6th of January. Now I'm obviously way into January at this point, and I'm still working on the Daft Days, and that's because I decided that I wanted to just work at it at my own pace. Often the exercises and prompts in there have like 2 prompts or 2 exercises per day, and that, felt a bit much, so I have allowed myself to split those over 2 days. And also, if I've had a day where I've not been feeling very well, or I've just been too busy with other stuff, I've allowed myself to skip it and carry on the next day and not have any guilt around that. I just have to realise that being really rigid with things and trying to build habits, for me, it doesn't work if I try to do something every day or try to stick to things diligently. I need that flexibility. I'm starting to really realise that with the way that my brain works. Anyway, so let's get to the exercise. The exercise was looking at this card. This is the Journey, which in the Wildwood card, in the Rider-Waite-Smith rather, or in the Marseille in the tarot, would be death. And this card talks to, in the book, about inevitable change and things moving on and things having to die for new things, for new growth and all that kind of stuff that we all know about the death card, right? And it said to like pull some cards if you like and do some journaling around the word change. And the prompt was, how do I cope with inevitable change in my life? And I decided to pull 2 cards. And I read the entries in the books and, pondered that and pondered what these cards usually mean, and then did a bit of journaling on that. So the first card that I pulled was the Ace of Stones, which is the Ace of Pentacles or the Ace of Coins, or the Ace of Discs, depending on which tarot deck you are looking at. And the second card I pulled was the Pole Star, which would be the star in a classic tarot deck of any system. And I did my journaling around that and what that meant for me about how I deal with or cope with inevitable change in my life. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is something that I sort of realised when I had finished the exercise and I was sitting there with the cards in front of me on the table, and I had written my journal entry, and I was sitting there and I was sipping my tea, my morning tea, and the house was lovely and quiet because it was early in the morning and my husband hadn't yet got up, Dr. Nomi was snuggled up next to me on the sofa under her blankie. And I started to just really look at the cards, really look at the imagery. And what I'm going to do is read this little bit of journal entry that I added. So I put a little asterisk with addendum. Sitting drinking my tea while really looking at those two card pulls, I realise that I have been journaling on these drawers these past 2 weeks, and yet I have not really taken the time to really look at the cards, especially when taken together as a reading or spread. I've been so focused on just the prompts and the information in the books that I forgot to pay attention to the most important part of this year-long quest, the cards themselves, which is very unusual for me because I am such a visually motivated person. So usually the cards is something that I really sink into. I do path working with cards. I like to really journal into like the imagery of cards and symbolism, just really sink into them. And for some reason I hadn't been doing that for this exercise. I've been kind of almost rushing through it to have done the task. And this reading yesterday was almost like a turning point for me, in that I didn't want to just tick a box to say that I had done it on my to-do list for the day. It sort of became something that I'm sinking into. So the entry continues. As I sat sipping on my tea and pondering the Ace of Stones and the Pole Star, I wondered, is the person in the Pole Star on a journey? Because of the card that starts this all off, right? The journey. See if I can find words. Are they going on a journey to or from the clearing with the standing stone? I like to think they are journeying away from the clearing of trees that house this magnificent rock, because the ace is a beginning. The stones speak to resources and steadfastness to create, and the will to create your reality in the material realm. The resources and the will to create your reality in the... Oh my god. I've written something really weird. It was early in the morning. Hang on. Let me read it so it makes sense. Steadfastness to create your reality in the material realm. Yeah, I'll read that again. Sorry. The ace is a beginning. The stones speak to the resources and steadfastness. The ability to create your reality in the material realm. That makes more sense. Morning brain. You create your reality in the... I'm just reading the same thing now. This is becoming more like a traditional Kelly Bear video where it starts to spiral out of control. We'll reel it back in. And so this character in the Pole Star takes what it is they need from visiting this stone, and then they turn to face the Pole Star along the path through the trees to face whatever life will bring, ready for something new and exciting, hopeful, prepared, and willing to put the work in. They have a plan, but they will be flexible and adaptable, but always following their guiding light. So when you think about this, as we have the standing stones, and then the second card, the one following it, was the Pole Star. So I feel like you have this clearing of trees with this beautiful standing stone, which has a labyrinth carved into it, if you can see that. And then I want to feel like they're then moving on and heading to pastures new, onto their journey, the next journey, the next level. And the reason this all kicked off these thoughts is, inevitable change, right? People always say that, what's that quote? The only thing that is certain in life is death and taxes. And I've said this on this channel before. Even taxes aren't certain, because plenty of people avoid those through tax havens and loopholes. So death is inevitable, but also change. Change is the only thing that is 100% inevitable, and the only true constant in this universe, as far as I can tell. Just little old me, what do I know? But that's my observation. And death is a change. And it made me think about, you know, my shifting paradigms. And it also ties in again with, you know, this Wildwood quest, this year in the Wildwood that I'm doing, because I've noticed when I do sit down in the mornings now, I was doing it in the evenings, but I've switched it into the mornings because I feel it's just a bit quieter and it's just a bit more of a still time for me than trying to do it in the evenings when I might be a little bit harried and might not have got everything I wanted to get done. But I noticed that I was doing something that I would never have thought I would be doing, even like, you know, just a few years ago, which is I'm talking to my tarot decks. And I've mentioned this before, where I talk to my tarot decks and go, hello tarot, hello happy tarot, hello whatever, I'm going to do a reading with you. But it was more just like, I don't know, I was doing this thing with, and it came about with like Aidan Watter's work. Yes, I'm mentioning Aidan Watter again, with 6 Ways, and then now also Changeling, one of his other works. And that idea of like, even if you feel a bit silly or you're working with the spirit model or the energetic model, just sort of, even if you're not sure, just sort of just acting as if it is real, just walking the walk and faking it till you make it. It's also kind of a chaos magic-y thing, right? It's just sort of, you have to like treat whatever paradigm you're working in at the time, or whatever system you're using at the time, or whatever it is, as like true and real and 100%. So just go with it, right? Just go with it. So I was just going with it and trying some stuff out. But I started doing what I do when I do magic, when I am like gathering materia and the things that I'm going to work with, in relationship with, not use but work with, which was a one paradigm shift. And, you know, cleansing and consecrating and dedicating the ingredients for a spell and speaking to the ingredients. So say, for example, you're using a plant, a dried herb or a fresh herb in a spell, speaking to that plant, the spirit of that plant. And this was another thing that came up again in Changeling, where you say creature of such and such, and you speak to it. So what I've been saying to this deck and some of my other decks is, creature of the wildwood, good morning, I have a question for you. And then you know, I'll just go on with my reading practice, you know, shuffling and asking, you know, focusing on the question and all that jazz. Just really starting to not only treat things that are living as being imbued with, you know, a spirit. That's something that I've been doing for a while, which was already a kind of paradigm shift for me, which came about with more of my working with herbs and plants and starting to study herbalism more in a more focused way, although I have been very off and on with that over the years. You know, when I go to my local PARK, I have to spell it out because this little one will get very excited, to forage, say for example for hawthorn berries in the autumn, I always ask the plant if I can take anything, if I can forage. I ask for permission. Sometimes they say no, and sometimes they say yes, and I don't know how I can explain qualifying that. It's almost like what would be that sort of just a knowing. It's not like they say yes and I hear a little voice, though that would be quite alarming. It's almost like this sort of feeling or knowing, claircognizance, that clair knowing. And if they say yes, then I can thank them once I've taken something, offer some water, to pour some water, say a few words. But plants, right, they are living, they are growing, and they are producing and reproducing, and it, you know, sort of cognizantly, that sort of was a step that was easier for me to make. Maybe not right at the beginning. Maybe I did feel like a bit like a crazy lady talking to the plants in my local PRK, and I've definitely had people walk up on me and with their, when they're walking their dog or what have you, and they like, you can tell they're like, whoa, this is a fucking crazy lady. And some people, if I'm there, you know, people that I see often, they must be like, oh god, there's that weird plant lady again. With a bag, picking things off of plants, or walking through the trees and like touching the plants, and looks like she's talking to them. I am talking to them. But when it comes to inanimate objects, anyway, it's different, right? Because this doesn't produce or reproduce in a living sense. It doesn't breathe like a plant, well, plants do technically breathe, but in a different way, like a living being. And so making that leap to inanimate objects having being imbued with a sense of spirit or something was just far too large a leap for me to take, right? But as I have continued on my practice, as I have continued doing my offerings, I started them back up again after having a bit of a break from them, because again I was sort of getting very stuck in my head and rigid about it, and it was causing some friction with the way that my brain works. I've allowed myself to be a bit more relaxed and fluid about that, and less formal. And the more that I sort of, also I noticed once I started including spirits of place and spirits of home in my offerings, this home obviously, more stuff started, I could feel a shift, and I felt like I was starting to pick up on stuff, like as in like sensing stuff, things, beings, spirit allies. I don't know, it started to like really just kick in and kick up a notch. I don't want to speak on that because that's still something that I'm working with and working through and strengthening, but it really it really started to shift the way that I was interacting with things. And it doesn't mean that every single thing that I'm picking up, you know, like this piece of wax that I wax my thread with, or, you know, this little clip or what have you, it's not about like every single thing is a living being, you know, but there's this certain things that you use often, that you interact with regularly, that you treat in a certain way, plants that you see on a regular basis and interact with a regular basis, you start to like pick up on stuff, or it starts to be imbued with stuff, right? And it's really interesting, and I wanted to make this video yesterday after I'd had this sort of moment, but I felt like I couldn't clarify or articulate my thoughts, and I wanted to give myself some time to sort of think on it and organize like my brain a little bit. And I decided to seek out a podcast to listen to on animism, and the first one that came up was called what was it called? Oh, it was something along the lines of Animism is Normative Consciousness, and it's the Emerald podcast, and I will link it down below because I'm going to reference it quite a bit going forward, and I have written some notes. So yeah, this feeling has been going on for a while and shifting for a while, and I've realised that I'm interacting with things in a slightly different way, and at first, as I said, it started with plants and being at the PARK. Did I say the word itself and she's sat up, or is she just stretching? Oh my god, I hope I didn't get her all. She seems pretty chill. You okay, boo boo? Yeah, we'll go in a little bit after this. She wants to go OUT. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. But I think, yeah, it first I really started to pick up on stuff when I went to a trip to the Scottish Highlands in the spring of 2017. That's what really I had this like really intense, I don't know, I'm always, whenever I'm in like the mountains, like surrounded by pine trees, there's just something happens to me, I don't know. And that really kicked off stuff. That's when I really started looking at herbalism again with more earnest. And it's been, so, you know, that was nearly 6 years ago. So it's been a really slow process, because I feel like my rational brain has been really sort of stepping in the way. That materialist worldview has been really sort of so ingrained that it's trying to like shed it, but it has to happen really slowly, because otherwise it's too much of a shock to my poor system, right? This podcast was really, really beautiful, really, really well researched, really, really interesting, and quite poetic. I really recommend it. Really, can I say really any more times? Probably. I recommend that you listen to it if this is something that interests you, because there's lots of great information in there. But the guy that Joshua, the podcast host, talks about, he quotes a lot of people in it, and he says that animism is not something you believe, but something you experience, which has been my experience, right? I couldn't just read about something or listen to someone else talk about this model of or worldview. I had to start experiencing it for myself, or I started to experience it for myself when I started to just go, well, let's just try the things and do the things and just act as if they're real. And things then started to happen, right? So we're not separate from nature. We are a part of it, right? We always sort of say, oh, let's go out in nature. We are nature. We are in nature by living in our bodies, right? Nomi is a part of nature. I think what people mean is get out into green spaces, whether those are wild green spaces like a national park, or a cultivated, I said the P word, she's not noticed though, that's good, or, you know, cultivated spaces. Like I have a cultivated space near me where I take this little one for adventures, pup ventures we call them. And I think once you start to sort of reintegrate yourself as a human being back into the term nature, that's where that shift that really helps with the shift, right? So in this podcast, an anthropologist, I believe, called Tim Ingold is quoted as saying that questions of belief only arise when you have already extracted yourself from the world and made yourself separate from it, right? So that's what I'm speaking on there. And there's this he goes on to talk about how, you know, for the vast majority of human history and for the vast majority of cultures around the world, animism has been and still is the main view. It's more widely practiced and believed in, to use that term that is questionable in itself. It's the people, it's the majority. It's the, as he puts it, animism is normative consciousness, right? Which I really, really enjoyed, and he keeps saying that throughout the podcast. It's really, really interesting. And so he says personhood is a wider category than humans. So, and it's the more normal way, the more natural way to view the world as personhood. So me as a human has personhood, Nomi as a dog has personhood, you know, trees have personhood, that kind of thing. You start to open up the conversation, you start to open up your worldview, and I found that really, really interesting. And he goes on to talk about how the definition of animism is inherently biased. Like in a lot of cultures around the world, they don't have words for religion. They don't necessarily have words for animism. It just is. Animism is a colonial sort of Western construct. And it's only been through the last 400-500 years, and especially, you know, the years of Enlightenment, the Age of Enlightenment, and the material worldview taking hold of sort of the Western, again, that to use that phrase, because I you know, in lieu of anything other that I could use, I don't know, is that it's it's biased, because the definition in the dictionary, which is what the podcast host also gives, is that it talks about animism is the belief that inanimate objects have a spirit or soul or consciousness or whatever it is, some kind of livingness about them. And he's saying there's already there that inherent bias, because they're calling those inanimate objects and assuming that they're animate. It's coming from a materialistic approach already. And also that the man that coined the term animism, who was an anthropologist, again I believe, another anthropologist, he said, like, the absolute gall and sort of arrogance to tell millennia of humans and to tell every other culture that isn't Western, white, Christian, Judeo-Christian, Abrahamic, whatever sort of viewpoint is wrong. You're all wrong. I'm right. And like is but hey, that's, what's that again, that quote, please God grant me the confidence of a middle-aged white man. So this guy, he's like, no, you're all wrong. And so this term animism has obviously taken off. But when you think about it, then the animism is therefore the materialist worldview. I mean, we know this already, right? And capitalism it's rooted in colonialism and materialism, and therefore also then we get capitalism. And I think he also talks about other philosophies as well as being sort of inherently materialist, like Marxism as well. So he's not just picking on, like, one particular group. But he says that, it's really been a very small amount of time that we've had this current worldview in this particular part of the world. And that maybe we can be open to exploring that a bit more. And it made me think of something that I heard a couple of months ago now. I was listening to the Lux Occult podcast, which I really enjoy. Again, I will try to remember to link the particular episode below. But Lux Estrata, the host, she was interviewing Jason Miller, who has a newish book out that it came out last summer, I believe. Oh, I've got to go. I will come back. That's my doorbell. Sorry about that. That doorbell typically going off in the middle of filming. But now Nomi has a new big bag of her tasty food. Her big bag of kibble just arrived. Yeah, it was for you, boo-boo. So yeah, I can't really remember what I was talking about. That sort of cut my train of thought, but I think I'm sort of getting to the end of what I wanted to say anyway. I was erring on the side of sort of rambling into sort of randomness, but I wanted to say, in the light of, the materialist worldview and sort of capitalism and sort of colonialism and all that, I saw someone on Twitter a while back tweet that re-enchanting the world is an act of resistance. Obviously there are many other acts of resistance, and we need to be doing more than just re-enchanting the world, in my opinion. But re-enchanting your world is still an act of resistance, because it goes against the grain, right? The sort of consensus reality, or the agreed upon sort of reality. Joshua Schrei, the host of the Emerald podcast, closed out this episode that I'm talking about here with a really, really beautiful quote, which is this: because if the world is already seen to be dead, then how can we possibly save it? Why would we save it, right? Because I think sometimes just us being at risk isn't enough, or people don't perceive the risk to themselves as enough. We see that with the pandemic, right? Because, so many people hadn't taken it seriously, or haven't been taking it seriously, unless it like directly affects them. And even if it has directly affected them, I don't know, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on there. But I think if we see the world as living and us as a part of it, not separate from it, you know, that is, you know, if we all consciously shifted to that, and maybe, you know, mainly the people in power that hold the power, that pull the strings, that call the shots, the chances of them having a huge paradigm shift is slim to none, let's be honest. So it kind of gets left to us, and there's a lot more of us than them, right? Somehow I'm ending up going on a rant about environmentalism and how the world is being destroyed, but it ties in, right, with the idea of with animism. But yeah, so I don't know what this video kind of is. It's just I guess it's just a sort of philosophical ramble. I've always wanted to make content like this on my channel, but I've dabbled a little bit on and off over the years, but I tend to sort of err on the side of not doing it because, you know, I've come to the end of this now, talking at the camera, and I feel like I haven't really said much of anything. I feel like I'm speaking either nonsense, or I'm not making sense, or I'm not really making any kind of point, which isn't necessarily the point of this video. It was just to sort of speak on how my views have been starting to really shift, and how it's been very, very gradual, and now in the last like couple of months it's almost suddenly like it's gained momentum. It was going along really slowly, and now it's starting to really pick up, and it's really rolling, and I can feel this like wave of stuff going on, and it's quite intense, but in a really good way. But also because part of me, I don't have that confidence to, I feel like I don't know anything. Who am I to talk about this? I don't know what I'm talking about. I just can only speak on my own experience, but no one's asking me to have all the answers, right? So it's fine. It's a discussion. So I open it to anyone else watching this. Where do you stand? Where is your paradigm? And I know this again ties in with one of the questions in the Trad Witch tag, but you know, do you have an animist point of view? Do you have a pantheistic point of view? You know, I'd love to see any responses to this, either in the comments below, or, you know, in your own video talking about animism, or talking about just paradigm shifts in your practice in general. You know, so obviously I've gone from using a very sort of mental and psychological model of magic, for example, and sort of really swaying to a more sort of spirit and energetic model, which again, a few years ago I never would have thought I'd hear myself say. But again, I always thought that I would never work with Marseille, and now it's my favourite kind of deck to work with. So change is inevitable, just like it says in this card, which brings us back round to where this video started and what's prompted this entire thing. So I will leave it there. If you have made it all the way to the end, wow, well done. Thank you so much for watching. Let's keep the conversation going if you want to. This might not be of interest to anyone. It might fall flat on its face, but I'm still putting it out there anyway, just in case anyone was wondering where I was in my practice. There's a sort of sense of like, I don't know. I just also wanted to like talk it out, because trying to write it out, it works in to a certain extent, but sometimes I can't. Writing stuff out alone doesn't help me. I need to talk it out, and the best person to talk it out with is you out there at the moment, because this isn't really my spouse's thing. So there's that. But yeah, I will stop it there, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Take care of yourself. Ciao.